Oh, I
I think
see.
we're ready. Yeah. Everybody who's joining us right now, welcome to this Learning 2020 session called Beyond the Letters, the real impact of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. To get things going, I will introduce myself. I'm Liza Wisner, Open Sesame's Senior Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Curation Specialist, and I'm joined by Abby Miles, Open Sesame's Senior Director of People. I'm sure you'll agree that today's session is important. Recent events have allowed us to sort of refocus and re-energize our action in regards to being not only top learning and development professionals, but having a lens towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are so many points that we have clear agreement on, and that's what we're going to focus on. We're really going to focus on moving that needle and how can we have impact, which is why today we're calling this session Beyond Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We want to talk about the real impact and we want to start moving fast, right? We want to just have results and we want to find out what's going on in all of our organizations. Now, the beauty about this session is Abby and I have really worked together to uncover what conversations professionals are having in the industry. We recently did a presentation where we had a slew of professionals just in an amazing panel sharing ideas about how their organizations are successful with diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And that's what we're bringing to you today. To get things started, I want to formally introduce Abby Miles. Abby is the Senior Director of People at Open Sesame with more than 15 years of experience in learning technology industry work. This includes product work, customer success, and people management. And Abby knows what it takes to build productive and engaged teams. Abby studied at the University of Portland, earning a degree in management. And as the Senior Director of People at Open Sesame, I believe she combines her top expertise in people management with her passion for people. And so she leads our recruiting, training, DE&I, employee experience initiatives, and she's just an all-around amazing person. So Abby, thank you so much for joining me and facilitating this amazing session.
Thank you, Lisa. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here too. So Abby, do you want to just get us started with what we're going to be talking about today?
Sure. Yeah, I'm really excited to chat with Lisa and everybody here on the call listening in. We're going to do a little bit of foundational work about DE&I for those of you that are kind of just getting started or joining the conversation for the first time. We're going to talk about why now and how you can get started. So some good conversation there. Some of the challenges that we faced and that our customers are facing and that our nation is facing and that companies are facing and their role that they play, the future of DE&I work, and then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So please answer questions. Lisa and I are going to try to chat and keep an eye on the chat as well. So we will have time for questions at the end. If we miss a question throughout the presentation, don't hesitate to repost it. So we'll see how quickly we're scrolling through stuff. So thank you. So for those of you just quickly that don't know who Open Sesame is, I want to just give a super high level overview of what we are and what we do and who we help. So Open Sesame is an online training provider. So we are off-the-shelf training and we offer the world's most comprehensive catalog of courses. So you can see some of the top level content here. I'm sure as a learning organization, you guys are offering a lot of these training courses, things like business skills, safety, compliance, certification training, technology, industry specific, and then obviously diversity, equity, and inclusion training and all that is wrapped up into that bucket. We have these courses off the shelf that you can buy in bundles and package together to help train and support your organization and your community of learners.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that I just wanted to add, Abby, is that, I love our mission statement, which is we're dedicated to developing the world's most productive and admired workforces. And I feel like, no matter what it is, these categories, may change, they may adjust, they may change as they need to, but the role is just to make sure that we're creating opportunities where our organizations are supported. And I just want to talk, Abby, on the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about how we do this, right? So my role is the Senior Curator of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So I work as part of the curation team. And part of the curation team is a team of a lot of people who are all specialized in a specific portion of the catalog. And what that means is that when our companies are working with us, they don't have to know all 20,000 courses in the catalog. They don't have to worry about that, because our role is really to make sure that you have the support you need to make sure that you're learning about how the catalog can support you in your initiatives, because each organization is different and everybody may want to participate with our training opportunities in a different way. And so my role is really to understand what are your strategic initiatives as they align to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how does our catalog support you in that. And a little tidbit, I guess you could say, about me is before I joined Open Sesame, I was a customer of Open Sesame. So I led an organization where we had Open Sesame as a customer. And the beauty about that is I see the value of having an organization like Open Sesame in so many different ways, not only in making sure that, you know, the complexity of just launching a learning management system and then the IT complexity of integrating with multiple vendors, that is all gone away. And I would tell you the most amazing thing for me about Open Sesame is the customer service. So I would say as we're going through this presentation, one of the things that I've learned is that the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And I absolutely love working for Open Sesame because I know that the same level of service that we're providing internally, the same level of service that Abby provides me as an employee of Open Sesame is the same level of service that we're providing customers for the product that we're serving. And for me, that's just really what diversity, equity, and inclusion is really all about. It's really about meeting people where they're at and supporting them so they can capitalize on their strengths. So we're going to start off with a journey, and I know we're all here for many reasons, and you all have your own journey of what led you here. This is a learning organization. We're all in a learning community. Most of the people in this room, in this space right now, are learning professionals. So we're going to speak on that lens. We're going to speak as a community of people supporting each other. And I'm, I guess, sensitive to the fact that some of you may be in this role of being a learning professional in your organization, but you may not even be familiar with the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion. You may be tagged as the person who's in charge of diversity, equity, and inclusion in addition to other things. And you may be on a different spectrum of where we are all at. But we all have a journey of how we got there. But I say that because that's the lens that you're going to be doing this work in. Your own personal experience is what's going to guide how you do this work. Now, we can tack on some theory and some practicality of what works and what doesn't and lessons learned, but you're always going to be looking through that lens. And that's why I'm bringing you this story. So back in the early 2000s, I was fortunate enough to, after graduating with my degree in computer science, I was fortunate enough to be hired to manage a National Science Foundation grant where we partnered with organizations like Google and other research organizations in the nation to bring more students, more historically underrepresented minorities to study science, technology, engineering, and math, and provide them with opportunities where they were able to find education to employment. So while I was doing this work, I ended up just having an affinity to the organization Google, and I followed Google and I followed them in their journey. And I feel like that's what changed the trajectory of me moving from being a computer scientist to moving to becoming a learning leader and really truly being passionate about employee engagement, capitalizing on strengths, and how organizations can move the needle in how people are being effective in their organizations. And as we were going through my program while we're working with Google, you know, there was just so many things that I learned. One was that they were spending over $200 million on employee engagement, and not just on increasing diversity numbers, but also trying to understand how do team members work better together. But one thing that I learned, and on the next slide, you'll see, one thing that I learned from Google is that they had a project going on, which is actually pretty exciting. And some of y'all may know about this project, which they codenamed Project Aristotle. It's a tribute to Aristotle and his quote of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And the goal was to find out what makes team members more effective. In fact, Google was trying to figure out how can we make more money, right? By making sure that when we have 10 teams and they launch a project, how can we have the most success, right? And what they ended up finding out, just to fast forward this whole thing, 2 years of research, is they found out that it wasn't so much as who was on the team in terms of who was the smartest person on the team. Did they hire the smartest engineer on the team? The number one reason why teams were successful was psychological safety. And this changed my mindset because I mentioned earlier that I graduated with a degree in computer science. I was trying to find the smartest kids to come and be supported in this industry, right? And realizing that psychological safety was the thing they needed to be successful in these organizations completely shifted the way I thought about how we were preparing our youth to enter the workforce. And when I did that, when I had that shift, when I decided to merge IQ and EQ, it really was what I call the iceberg effect, where when you are not aware, right? And the next slide shows you that when you think about success, when you think about hiring the best, most of the time we're thinking who's got the high honors, right? Who's got the highest grades? Who went to what college? But you need to know that the riches are below the surface. It's all about psychological safety. It's finding out who can come and make us feel safe, right? And creating an environment where people feel confident to do the work they want to do. And one of the things I always say is that if you feel embarrassed, or if you feel like you're going to be punished because you made a mistake, you asked a question, or you offered a new idea, that's probably not the place for you. That's probably not the team for you, because you're always going to be checking yourself, and you're always not going to be able to have that emotional experience you need to have to find success with the organizations. And that's the lens that I want us to take in regards to learning about diversity, equity, and inclusion. All of us have Google and Alexa, and so you can go and Google diversity, equity, and inclusion and learn those theories. But when you see things in one way and other people see things in a different way, that is the beauty of coming together to work together. That is how we all capitalize on our strengths. Because one of the things I did is with my teams, we actually bought different lenses, and everybody picked a different lens, and we tried to see things from each other's perspectives. And as much as we may appreciate that we have systems and processes and policies and procedures in place, and everybody must, what sometimes you say, toe the line, right? You have to appreciate the fact that somebody may see things a different way, and that may be the solution that your organization needs to take it to the next level. So I would say, moving into the rest of our presentation, much of the content is going to be familiar to you as a learning and development practitioner. But as we're talking about diversity training, I think I want to reiterate that we need to see this from a lens of capitalizing on everyone's individual strengths. So let's just go ahead and clarify just for a minute what we mean by diversity, equity, and inclusion, because sometimes in the chat, if you want to put it in there, I hear different definitions. And so I want to make sure that we are all on the same page. So workplace diversity not only refers to differences between employees, but it also refers to the acceptance of different ways of celebration in the workplace. Some people like to be celebrated in public. Some people don't, they would go red or whatever, they would just be so embarrassed if you celebrated them in public. Those are things you need to know about your organization. And that's what diversity is. It's not just about race, color, ethnicity, national origin, and all the other things that we think about, but we need to think about the experiential differences that we have and also the cognitive differences. And now next, let's define equity. I love equity because it's the word that is confused with the word equality. And there's many different images to define what equity is and what equality is, but I absolutely love this one, and I want to tag in our most amazing equity consultant, Tara Cooper, who supports us at the work we do at Open Sesame. And she shows this image, and I think it speaks very clearly that the concept of equity is really synonymous with just fairness, right? We all want to get there. We all want to do the work, right? But can we provide an opportunity where it's fair and everybody is having the same opportunities to become successful? So enacting equity is really about providing people with fair opportunities to attain their full potential. So next, let's now talk about what inclusion is. And inclusion is really how it all comes together. The whole point of diversity and equity is inclusion. It's making sure that you're creating an ongoing effort to promote full participation and a sense of belonging in all employees, not just employees though, customers and strategic partners. And as I reel Abby to start having this conversation with us, I'm really going to be digging into understanding, Abby's role is on people, but as a strategic initiative, DE&I is a strategic initiative for the Open Sesame organization as a whole. It's not just about the employees. It's about our customers, our strategic partners, and our communities. How are we interacting and how are we envisioning that leading inclusively is going to be supportive of the work we do? And just to kind of close off that definition, some of y'all may have heard the phrase coined by Verna Myers. She says that diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance, right? Not just sitting on the sidelines, you're being invited to dance. And it's an ongoing process, and it's a process of collaboration, and it's a process of just having better results for the communities that we serve.
Yeah, and just to add on to this from my perspective in the employee life cycle is if you're part of the HR organization within your company, diversity, often people think about like, okay, we've got to increase our hiring numbers, increase our talent pipeline. And if you don't have this equity and inclusion piece, you're just going to have a hole at the bottom of your bucket and people are going to leave just as quickly as you can recruit them in. So you need to make sure that you are not only focusing on the diversity of the metrics and the people that you're hiring, but what is their full experience once they join your organization. So that's something that we are really working on and really paying attention to, because we know we can't change one piece of the funnel without changing the whole life cycle of our internal staff, as well as supporting our customers that are trying to do the same.
Yeah. So how do we use it as a tool, Abby? How do we use DE&I as a tool?
Yeah, so it is a tool for us that we use in a variety of ways. It's a strategic tool built with the right people. So it's something that is leading strategy within our company. Not only, I think of Liza and I as kind of the two sides to the coin. My role is really on our internal people and staff and the people of Open Sesame and the work we're doing in our community. And Liza is on the customer facing side, where when customers reach out to us and they're building their training programs and they're trying to build out strategy within their organizations, we can help them with their DEI tools in that way as well. D&I work allows space for uncomfortable conversations, left and right. You need to be prepared to have uncomfortable conversations. You need to, going back to Project Aristotle, you need to make it a psychologically safe place to have those uncomfortable conversations. And you need to be prepared and have the tools to respond in those uncomfortable conversations in an appropriate way. That is, not the defensive way, not the dismissive way, but really being able to have uncomfortable conversations where everybody involved is being heard. It also allows us to explore people's strengths and values in different ways. So it allows us to put value on those different lenses. So all those different sunglasses that Liza had, there is value in that, and there is value left and right. And we will refer to a couple of research pieces that have shown that and have proven that. There is a business case in it, and there's also a human case to be made there. So it allows us to really explore and provide, see value in everybody's unique lenses that they offer. At Open Sesame, DE&I is not a couple of things. So it's not a debate. It's not a he said, she said. It's not a what happened on Twitter. It's not gaslighting. It is not an anything goes environment. It is a respectful, safe space to have hard, difficult conversations, but in an impactful way. And so we've outlined that for our employees, for our staff, for how we communicate to our customers. We have ground rules around that, and we hold each other accountable. That's one of our ground rules. And in our own internal diversity statement, a big component of it is holding each other accountable in a safe and respectful way.
Yes.
So the question we hear often and that we have from customers and in various sessions that we've had is, if not now, then when? There are a lot of things that you can put to this. There's some of the more business case benefits here on the slide. But there's a lot more at play than just business case and making money and making better product. That is going to that's going to be the love language of some people that you speak to. And that is kind of going to be your why for some folks. But there's other whys too. I always think back to the Chinese proverb that I've heard for years and years and years. And I think it applies to DE&I work of the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. And I think that absolutely applies here. 2020's been a year for any of my HR peers on the call. It's been a year. It's been a tough year. There's been a lot of stuff going on in 2020. And I think that is a moment that we can see as an opportunity to really improve upon where we're at, what we're doing, how can we do better, how can we do more. from a workforce perspective and through lots of workforce demographic data, you'll see I want to get my numbers right, Gen Z is 50% non-white. So your workforce, if you look at your workforce and the makeup of your workforce, who are the people that you are working with? Who is your team members? Who's your family, your work family? Millennials, 50%, 56% are non-white. And that is only going to increase. So if nothing else, you need to be working with and speaking to your community in a way that speaks to them. And so to assume that everybody is the same as you or the same as it was 10 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago when your organization was developed is not seeing things with open eyes and where the future is going. So the change and the time is now, and to build your organization and to adjust and to adapt is going to put you ahead for the future.
Fantastic. Okay, so now that we've talked about a little bit of the why, let's just dive right into the how. And I always believe in doing either you're going to do an assessment or you're going to measure or you're going to evaluate something. And so the fastest way for you to find out where you are at is to do what is called diversity and inclusion maturity matrix. Now, this matrix exists in so many different formats from so many different organizations. So if you Google it, you'll find so many ones, but we have one that we are actually close to launching here at Open Sesame. But the goal of this is to find out exactly what does your organization need to have in place to be where you want to be, right? So as you can see, there's different levels. You may not want to be at level 5. Let's just imagine you don't want to be at level 5. So find out what is it and where the gaps are. How can you, like if you want to maintain a diverse workforce, Abby talked about bringing people in the door and keeping them in, right? So what are you doing to keep people in the door? How do you maintain your diverse workforce? How do you create equitable hiring and compensation packages, right? How do you do that, right? And how do you create that inclusive environment we're working for? The great resource that I'm sharing here, it'll be linked for you to be able to know exactly where I got this. But the point is, if you do an assessment of your organization, then you know where the gaps are and how you can move the needle. You need to know that this is not a sprint. This isn't something that you hire a person and then a year later you're done with it and now they can just kind of hang out. No, this is something that's ongoing and you're probably already doing this work. You just probably didn't call it diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So now we're just putting some verbiage to it and making sure that that this is part of a meaningful step that you're going to take in your DE&I efforts. So I just want to kind of mention some of the things that this matrix measures. One is the communication and education within your organization. So what are your ways of communicating with employees, customers, or stakeholders within your sphere of influence or your community? How do you communicate with them? How do you train them? How do you educate them? And then how do you assess, right? How do you measure success? Are you doing OKRs? Like, what are you doing, right? So it doesn't help you to have a strategic plan and measure things to that, right? So you have numbers for that, but you don't have a DE&I measurement, right? How do you know if you are successful? So do you have assessment? Do you have culture, right? And during the last session, it was really intriguing to hear about all the different types of cultures we could have. We want to promote a learning culture, but do we have a compliance culture, right? We're saying, oh yeah, we have a learning culture, but yeah, you really have a compliance culture because everything you have is mandatory, right? The point is figure out where you're at and what type of culture you have in your organization to be able to reach the level you want to reach. Investment and infrastructure. It doesn't help you to say you want to do this work, but you're not putting money behind it, right? Because everything takes investment. So what is the infrastructure? What infrastructure do you have and what investment have you made? And then last but not least, the measurement is really about your compensation, your recruitment, and retention. Once you rate your organization, you'll be able to find out where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, and the maturity matrix index will be able to help you see what can you continue to do and progressively over time find that it's bringing you success.
Yeah.
So Abby, go ahead.
I think this is nothing new for learning and development groups, doing gap analysis, figuring out where you're at, figuring out how you can do better, where you can do better. I think that DE&I work is very similar in that way. There is no failing. There is no tell us we're doing okay, or it's always just we are where we are. I think of like the concept of gamification, and there's no failing. You're always just leveling up and figuring out where you're at and what you need to do at that current level, and how can I build upon it. If you're a gamer, or if you've got kids that are gamers, you start as where you're at, and then you get tools, and you get armor, and you get, you know, new weapons and such in various games. And DEI work and L&D and training work is the same way. We're just constantly getting better and leveling up. So if you look at this and say, oh my gosh, I think I'm only a level 1 basic, like, that's okay. That's where we were at just years ago at Open Sesame. And we have customers at every level of this matrix. We have customers and we have training and support for them, regardless of where they're at. If you are at level 1 and you need to just make sure that people are trained and they know what diversity means, and they know what unconscious bias is, or some checkbox training to get the compliance side of things under control, that's okay. That's where you're at. We start there. And then next we look to level 2, and so on. And so we've got customers that are like amazing model companies that we strive to be like, that are at level 5. What are they doing? What are they working on? What power skills do they have that are taking them to the next level? And so don't look at this in a way of like good or bad or comparing yourself. It's just a matter of identifying and figuring out where you're at and where the gaps could be, and where to go from there.
Yep. I love how you said that, Abby. And the beauty about our work is that we get to bring that to, like, every customer benefits from every customer. So when I work with a customer, I bring that knowledge to the next, and it just feels like we're just growing this community of D&I champions who are really learning from each other. So it's been really exciting for me when we all start talking with each other, because and that's why we started this conversation, right, Abby? It was because there was a bunch of people talking, and we just realized that there was so much knowledge here that we needed to bring it to the masses.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess I'm going to ask you, Abby, I guess just as we're unpacking the ideas about DE&I, what challenges do you think, like just thinking through all the different organizations we visited with, that what challenges would they face in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what can we do, or what have we done to overcome them?
Yeah, what challenges have not been faced, I can say, is kind of the first question back to that. There is so much that come about here. So we actually surveyed a bunch of our customers around DE&I and how we could support them and how we can help them. And some of the challenges are really common across organizations. So empowering your leaders, leadership buy-in is the first challenge. So again, you have to find the love language of your organization and your leaders, and figure out where can they buy into it. Is it because it's going to make our products better? Is it because it's going to help us sell more? Is it because we love our work families and we want to care for our people as best we can? Or is it all of those things? Or is it just, do we need to show some data to back it up? There's lots of ways to gain leadership buy-in. And you need to, if you are not in the position of leadership to do those things, you need to figure out who are your champions in that space. Who can you tap? Who can you bring along on the journey and help support the cause along the way? As we know, training and development is like ultimately powerful and not really responsible in a lot of cases. So it's kind of balancing what can we do with the power of knowledge and training, while also maybe not being the person that's going to change the corporate strategy or the product strategy of the whole organization. Another challenge is building empathy skills. And we had a really great conversation around this. Empathy, I think, is at the core of equity and inclusion, and understanding that everyone around me is not me. It does not have the same lived experience as I do. They don't have the same environment that I do, and everybody has a different lens. And empathy is a way to say, okay, Liza's experience is different than mine. Lisa, what was your experience? Let me hear that. Let me really understand that. And an interesting thing here is that empathy is a taught skill. It's not something that we can say, stop using the excuse of like, oh, they're just that way, or these people, or that's not our culture. We're not really a touchy-feely culture. Like that kind of thing is just not a thing. That's not true. Empathy can be taught, and can be taught to small children I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. We're teaching this. We're teaching things that like, oh, when you bonk somebody, that hurts them. You can teach them. That can be taught at all phases of life. That can be taught to adults. You can put people, this is where training comes into play. It is a safe space to teach somebody skills that they may not have otherwise been taught, or that they may not realize. They think that they've been taught it and they think that they have that skill, but they may not realize how it's impacting folks in different scenarios or situations at work. Another one is coaching, mentoring, and sponsorship. This is a challenge everywhere, making sure, back to those that bicycle graphic of what is equity? What does that look like for different people? How do we make sure that everyone is getting equitable resources to coaching, mentoring, and sponsorship is huge to giving folks support that they need, advancement that they need in their careers in the workplace. And how can we do that equitably and make sure that everyone is getting access, not just like, oh, hey, this buddy that I worked with went to my university. We're chums. I want to mentor him, make sure that he's really successful. Like, how can we look around the room and make sure that that's being equitably shared within your business? Authenticity, coming with authenticity is, I would say, a challenge. I think it's a challenge we face every day within our organizations, within our training, within the courses that we're bringing into our catalog, to making sure that they are truly authentic. I think humans and the human experience means that we have a pretty strong BS filter, and we can tell when things are not authentic, and you can tell when somebody's giving you a line, or when somebody's, we talked about that actually, Liza and I, as we were creating the slide deck. This isn't a moment to just put diverse stock photography in a slide deck. Let's not just pick a stock photo that had, like, we literally had a photo that was like, it looks like you went through and said,
like all that we were in the Olympics and we were everything.
Yes, like here's a young person, here's an older person, here's a black, a white, and a brown person. It was like, so just being aware that sometimes doesn't feel super authentic, and the conversations need to be authentic. And how can you facilitate that? And we've done that internally with some ground rules for our organization and ground rules for our people around assuming good intent. We're going to take action, and we're going to have conversations, and with good intentions. If something goes awry or astray, hold us accountable. Please hold us accountable. We're going to hold you accountable. But know that we are coming at it with authenticity, and we're going to make mistakes. And we sometimes might use the wrong language or words, or we might fumble over a difficult conversation. But we feel at Open Sesame that is more important than not having the conversation, for fear of messing something up or not being authentic, or fear of just doing the wrong thing. Because I think that a lot of DE&I work stops there. You do the easy stuff, the straightforward, okay, I'll do my unconscious bias training, I'll do some interviewer training, and then it gets a little bit harder. It gets a little more difficult of like, how am I going to do that? I'd rather just not touch it for safety, to be kind of keep in a safe space. And that's where we need to push ourselves while being authentic at the same time. Giving permission, I think I've touched on this in a couple different ways, but permission to have conversations that we've never had before. 2020 forced some of this on us. We've been doing this for years at Open Sesame. We've been doing a lot of things, a lot of work with our community, a lot of work. We're in the tech space, so we have a tech community. We're based in Portland, Oregon. We have a Portland, Oregon community and situation that we're working with here in our city. We have a political climate that we're working under. We have the Black Lives Matter movement and George Floyd's murder this summer that kind of threw everything upside down a little bit. So we are just giving permission to be vulnerable and have conversations that we've never had before, and to support people in ways that we never have before. Again, 2020, like, mental health is a challenge, and it's a challenge from many perspectives, and it's impacting everybody in different ways. And so just being open to difficult conversations, I think has been key. And with our customers, we have customers coming to us saying like, I need DE&I training, but I don't really know what that means. Or I've never built a DE&I strategy, or I don't know, this is hard for me. I don't know. I feel like I'm struggling. And how can I support my organization in a way that is going to be impactful and effective without putting our foot in our mouths or without, raising some legal or compliance situation. So lots going into that. And then just meeting people where they're at, which I think Liza's touched on. We're all human. We're all getting through this together and just trying to figure out where are people at, understanding that, respecting that, having empathy for that, and then working together to do the best we can. And then it's a marathon, not a sprint. This isn't something we're going to solve. This isn't something, like Liza said, we're not going to hire one person to have a title or a role that's going to drive this forward on behalf of our organization. It's going to take time and effort and energy and piece by piece, kind of that how do we eat an elephant one bite at a time situation. I think that is a reality for DE&I and for our organizations. And we've got folks, we're a relatively small company with just a couple hundred folks. We have customers that have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people that are everywhere from folks, entry-level warehouse workers, to executives, to young, to old. There are so many perspectives and varieties happening within companies that people are trying to move everybody forward together.
Mm-hmm. And also the global perspective. And yes. I guess in the interest of time, we can just very swiftly go through our own initiatives that we're doing, and I guess also talk about our learning culture. But I just wanted to mention that if you have any questions at all, and if we don't get to your questions before the end of this presentation, we're going to make a note to actually answer your questions after the session. So we'll go back into the chat and be able to answer your questions for you.
Yes, absolutely. So some of our initiatives, we do a lot of collaboration. So we are collaborating with our publisher community. So our catalog is made up of best-in-class publishers, people that are creating courses that are best in class in the space that they work in. So we are collaborating with them. We have subject matter experts in the same way that we do in safety and Microsoft Office. We have folks that are focusing in this DE&I work and in mind, the knowledge that comes in our mind and strategy work. We're collaborating with our customers to understand the different challenges that they are all facing. We're working with an equity consultant at Open Sesame that is working across our organization with our people, with our leaders, with different groups that are working on our products, that are working on different challenges. Each group has different challenges. So we're working there. We have a local organization called TechTown PDX that we're working with. It's tech communities in Portland that are focused specifically and very targeted at increasing diversity within the tech community. Tech is a not super diverse industry, and Portland is a not super diverse city. So this is a challenge that we're trying to work together to overcome. We're supporting new talent. This comes in a lot of forms, obviously within our own employee base, trying to grow new leaders and future leaders, but we also support our community. So people that won't be working for Open Sesame a year from now or 2 years from now, but how can we grow that pipeline? We're struggling with the pipeline right now. That's like a challenge that we are facing, where I think it's like 2% of our applicants are from underrepresented groups, which is really low. And so we recognize that, and we want to grow that pipeline for future years and future companies. So we're working with a local high school that does internships. De La Salle, it's a private high school here in Portland that students go to school 4 days a week, and 1 day a week they work at a corporate work study partner. And we support that financially, and that helps pay their tuition to go to the private school. We have a Step Into Tech, which is another high school internship program that we're working on. And we have Corsica, which is a gap year program for any of you that have students, college students or out of high school students that are choosing not to go to school this year for for COVID reasons, for financial reasons, for any number of reasons, Corsica is intended to support folks while they are not able to go to school or figure out what they're going to do. So those are kind of ways that we're choosing to give back to our community. And then we help educate. We help educate our employees. We take that, our mission is to develop the world's most productive and admired workforces, and we eat our dog food and we live that every day. So we have an internal training program called Open Sesame Qualified that 75% of our staff participate and complete. And that has a bunch of education and professional skills and personal skills. And I actually did a webinar just talking about our internal program a couple of weeks ago that we do have a recording for if anybody wants to learn more about how we're training our internal staff. And then we have a leadership skills development program. So our future managers, our future leaders, and high potential employees, we want to grow and help support them along the way.
All right. Well, Abby, it looks like we have 5 more minutes,
Okay.
a little bit less than that before the presentation actually ends. And so, and I know we still have a few more slides to cover. So I did want to mention that, of course, we're available to provide information that we just covered, but the next slide, actually, if you don't mind, just going to the next slide, shows one of the tools that we use, one of our, I guess you could say, one of our tools that you use specifically, right? So you and Matt, who works for you on your team, have developed the most amazing learning culture for us. And we were going to speak to this, but we did have this entire presentation about our learning culture done during our Learning Unlocked conference that we recently had. So we can send you that recording so you can watch the entire presentation about one of the tools that we use when we're unpacking what diversity, equity, inclusion as a culture looks like within our organization. We did have another question we were going to ask, which was about how the conversation of DE&I will advance in the next year. And Abby, I don't know, within just like 1 minute, do you want to just talk about what the future looks like?
Yeah, so I think the future is that this conversation needs to happen more. It needs to happen at every turn, in every meeting. It's not a sidebar topic, or it's not a project that the HR is working on or that one group is working on. It needs to be pervasive and interwoven into organizations and cultures and at every turn. So I think that it's just more. The conversations get easier, the hard conversations, you get more comfortable with having them. And I think that that's the case here.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess just to be, I guess respectable of everyone's time, we only have like about 2 more minutes. So I am just going to close out the session, and please know that we are going to be not only sending you this information, but we'll also be available to answer additional questions that you may have. And so we want to thank you so much for your time. We know that this diversity, equity, and inclusion work is really, the assumption here is that we want to have employees engaged, right? We're assuming that, but we're really hoping that you understand it's about nurturing a continuous learning culture, because none of us can predict what's going to happen in the future, but you have to create an environment where your teams are ready and resilient and they can move and adapt as necessary. So as we continue to shape the future of workforces around the world, just like Abby said, we hold ourselves accountable to doing this diverse, equitable, and inclusive work within our community. So we invite you to join us in this journey. We invite you to share with us your insight into what DE&I work looks like, how it's successful. Are you using the maturity matrix? Share that with us. How are you using it? Because we know that varieties of perspectives and voices are really what's going to strengthen our ability, all of our abilities, to be able to deliver the spark of learning to everyone. So with that, just want to say thank you. And Abby, do you want to just say a quick thank you?
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. I did see a couple questions. We'll try to follow up with folks. I think one of the questions I did want to touch on before we wrap up, Denise, I saw what tools and methods are we using? So we're using a lot of our own training courses. We also work with TED at Work. TED at Work has its TED Talks, but they have a lot of conversations around diversity and race. So we've used some of those internally to help facilitate some of these difficult conversations. Good questions. And we will get resources and links to everybody.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Yeah.